Alright, so back here on the 1978 Toyota pickup and trying to deal with my fuel cell fiasco. So in the last video showed what I was dealing with. So I got the bed back off. I did a bunch of checking around to see like where I could potentially go. I thought about something crazy where I'm sure the lighting's terrible, but something crazy where I'd notch out something in the back here where cut it like a bump out to where I get the fuel cell like tall enough up in this area to get out of the way of the drive shaft. But down here I end up even running out of room between the 4-link mount and this cross member that's in here, and so that becomes problematic, and I got to raise it real high. The bed basically comes to here, and then the drive shaft loop is there, so I'd be having the fuel system like way up in here, and then I'd be dealing with like trying to get down through underneath the bed in order to run the lines. That'd be a whole fiasco. Certainly couldn't do anything in between, in the middle, because of all of the mounts and where the drive shaft's got to go, so that was no joy. I thought about just being super lazy and just chucking it in the bed and don't do a damn thing, just fill it up right into the bed. But then I didn't like the idea of having them lines just sort of exposed and the fuel sender just sort of exposed to everything, so I'd end up wanting to have it covered anyhow. And so if I did do that sort of temporarily, I did end up having to figure out some way to cover it anyway. So that, nope, not doing that. Then looking at, I was thinking about putting it all the way in the back, but I put that down on the ground and was hopping up and down on it, and just like the idea of it hanging way back out here and potentially running into issues where I go over a speed bump or something and hit the gas tank like that. Nope, not doing that. And then so that meant that I had to basically give up on having the spare tire back here. So this mount that is in the middle here is where the spare tire was mounted before. The spare is 24 inches wide, and the tank is 12 inches wide, and I need a little bit of clearance, so it's more like 12 and a half, and then I wouldn't want it butted up against there, so I really looking like I'd probably need somewhere in the area of like 38 inches of space, and from the nut for the coilover to the end of the frame rail is barely 36 inches, so I'm like 2 inches shy of it ever possibly being able to work here, and that would entail like moving this member and all that other crap. So I'm like, all right, screw it. That's definitely not going to work. What I'll end up doing is I'll just run the spare in the bed, and so I'll find some way to mount the spare to the bed. That should be pretty easy to just create a little thing with a couple of nuts on it that I could just mount the spare in the bed and just give up on trying to run it down here. So this cross member is going away, and so the spacing that I have in here is 12 and a half. The tank is 12 inches wide, and so I'm giving myself a 1/4 inch on either side to have some sort of like rubber isolators or something. So what I'll do is I'll end up burning in these couple of new cross members that I'm making, and they're pretty beefy. So this is 1/8 inch inch square tube, and so like from like a stability standpoint, I think this stuff's 1/8 inch also, and it's hollow in between, but it's a lot larger. But this way I'm going to have two of them, plus I do have my coilover mount, so I feel pretty good about cutting this out, even though it was definitely a structural piece, even though it was just mounting the spare. This was definitely structural to the frame, but now that I got two that are a bit smaller, they're boxed, I feel like this is going to be fine as far as like a structure standpoint. And then I'll be able to put the tank in between this slot, and I'll have some room. So the tank's 30 inches wide, and it's 38 inches frame rail to frame rail. So I'll have some wiggle room to be able to decide if I want to jam it up one way, right in the middle, whatever. And then since I have 1/4 inch of space here on either side, I'll be able to, put a little piece of like rubber isolator in between the tank and these members, and kind of keep that solid in there. I'll still need to figure out some kind of mount on the other side. And so, I mean, I do want the tank to be coming in, like jamming up against something. So this is sort of like the lateral stability of the tank. But I do want the tank to be like hitting up against something. So I'll need to like put a lip on the frame on whatever side I end up mounting it. And then that way when I put straps underneath to like cinch the tank up, it'll hit on the lip. And so these are mostly just structural in order to get me to be able to remove this cross member. And then from there, I'll still need to figure out exactly where I'm going to set the tank. And now that I'll have these pieces in place, I'll be able to figure out, do I put a piece of angle? What do I want to do in order to get the bottom edge of the tank to have something that it's supported by? So this is sort of step one. So I'm just going to burn in these real quick, and then I got to cut this out. Hopefully I got a Sawzall blade that's long enough in order to get through there, because that's a big old beefy piece. So I'll just do a little bit of welding. Alright, so I'm not going to completely weld all those things in quite yet. I do want to get this cut out now that those couple of tacks will hold it in place just fine. I'll get this cut out, start fitting things, see where I want it. I don't want to seam weld all that, because then it'll be a huge pain in the butt if I got to move them or whatever. And then one other thing that I did do is when I made these cross members, I made sure to overlap where I could. So you see, like, it's cut with like an L here. And so I do want to end up tying the top edge of this to the top edge of the frame. So the frame's thicker at these, like the C part of the frame is thicker than the inside part. And so I do want to make sure that I'm tying to that top edge and not just the inner piece. All along here, the inner piece is welded all the way through, top and bottom, but I still want to be able to tie into the top piece, which is just a bit thicker metal. And so I did cut that little L shape in there in order for that to get a bit of a bite on the top piece. So I'll get that horrible chunk of metal cut out of there. However I end up doing it, probably be some annoying combination of Sawzall angle grinder and air chisel and a bunch of nonsense and cursing. So, all right, I'll get after that. Thanks. See you in the next one.